Welcome back, guys, to CFL Central. CFL content for the fans, by the fans. And we have our review of Week 16 of CFL action. We got 4 games. None of them include my Bombers. Sad faces, but that's okay because they're resting, getting ready for a big game that we will talk about come preview. But we got 4 games up here, with our first one being the Saskatchewan Roughriders fall short with a 36-28 loss to the Ottawa Redblacks. And the Saskatchewan Roughriders are seemingly in free fall. So, and it's one of those things where this race for third in the West could have been really interesting if Calgary decided to do something, but they didn't. So instead, it's just watching everything fall and a spot be really easy to take if the team steps up, and watching no one step up. I mean, the Elks are like trying to step up, but they were so far in the hole. It's kind of, they really struggling to dig themselves out of it. But Riders would lose 28-36. What do you think? What's your thoughts on this one here, Rick?
At least this game wasn't blown in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, actually. Well, it's funny because like half of the points of this entire game almost all came in the fourth quarter, but it was actually even with 14 points apiece in the fourth. But it was one of those things where Saskatchewan, came out decent. Like, all things considered, like they lost by 8 points, not by huge deficits. Not good that they lost to the Red Blacks. However, they didn't really get brutally beaten in any of these quarters. Like, there's no quarter that looks exceedingly bad, in the sense of, obviously in the third quarter they only put up a point, but they only give up 3. So it's one of those things where there isn't much of a point differential there. And then if we're looking at like the second quarter where they went down, Red Blacks put up 12, Riders put up 6. So even then, it's not like there's nothing where like there's no quarter where they got nothing and the Red Blacks got like 14 points. So it's one of those things where it was just consistent underperforming, in the sense of it wasn't like this big brutal collapse. It was more of like the Riders died with a whimper in this game. They didn't die with a bang. You know what I mean?
Keep in mind that they got a touchdown with 1 minute left in the game, and then they got a 2-point convert. So, I mean, if you take away that 8 points, they would have lost 36.
Yep, no, that's fair. And it's one of those things where that is a point. However, it also is a thing where, if we take that away, but then obviously they did get those points. So I don't think we should take it away. But it's one of those things where Saskatchewan just, like, if you want to beat a team like Ottawa, a team where on paper you should be the clear-cut favorite, it's one of those things where you got to get a lead. You got to establish a quarter or whatever where, because there's not a single quarter that the Rough Riders win. They either kind of match Ottawa or do slightly worse and play a little bit of catch-up. Because like I said, in the first and fourth quarter, they tied, but in the second and third, they went behind. So it's one of those things where you can't really win a football game if you don't win a single quarter. Even if you tie a few, if you don't win a single quarter, there's no hope for you winning this football game. So if you're the Rough Riders, I think what you want is you want to have an explosive start when you go into one of these upcoming games. You want to be able to put up points early, and then if your team kind of falls back into that matching their opponent phase for the rest, you can at least ride that out and get yourself a win. But it's one of those things where I feel like that's kind of where they got to go.
So there's 2 things to mention. Devontae Williams had another outstanding game with 136 rushing yards.
Yes.
And then also, a fellow person that we had on the channel, Braylon Addison, got his first touchdown of the season after the unluck that he has had.
Good stuff.
And he went 5 for 5, so that's good to see.
Yeah, no, he, like if we're looking at his receptions, he did well there. Got about 8 yards apiece. if we're looking here as well for the Red Blacks.
So while you're looking that information up, I will say,
Yeah.
going into this game, Dylan Crum did have 43 sacks against. Going it like finishing this game.
I see.
And Bryce Carter on Ottawa alone had 3 sacks himself.
Excellent. I'm just looking.
And Christian Albright had 2 sacks. Larry Dean had 12 total tackles.
Yeah. I'm just looking here. Yeah, because I mean, if
no, I know. I'm just filling in a.
No, that's fair. No, I'm just trying to see. I can't quite find it, but I mean, Dustin Crum would have a solid game. Go 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Dolagala would have an okay game. He would get 267. Never mind. I'll tell you later. But then he got himself 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. For Jake Dolagala. So, okay game, but I guess if you're the Riders, you're hoping for a little bit more out of him. But again, it's one of those things to remember that Dolagala is that second or third string quarterback, so that is something you do have to keep in mind. But, I mean, there's pretty much nothing else I have for this game. Is there anything else you got there for that game before we proceed? All right, well, we got our second game of the week, which is the BC Lions versus the Edmonton Elks. Where the Lions would win by a score of 37-29 in Edmonton. Edmonton obviously looking for a huge upset here. And they'd honestly play a solid game. They lost by 8 points. And so it's one of those things where, because they weren't expected to win, the fact that they were able to keep it within, a touchdown and a 2-point conversion is good for them. They'd start off rough. BC would put up 21 points. They go up 21-7 in the first quarter. They'd strike back a little bit in the 7, going 10-3. But then they just kind of, in the second half of this game, it just kind of flip-flopped a little bit back and forth. They'd go on this big push at the end of the game to try to get it done, but they couldn't get the yardage they needed, get those first downs that they needed. And it was one of those things where I think Trey Ford got sacked like 3 plays in a row. So it's one near the end there, and then that's when BC went into victory formation. So it's one of those things where if you're Edmonton, obviously Trey Ford is the guy you're rolling with. And when you go into next season, when you go into free agency, you got to look to start assembling the team around him, in the sense of there's going to be some guys that you like that you're going to want to keep around. But one of the things that's got to improve for a guy like Trey Ford is his offensive line. Obviously, Trey Ford has done some excellent job scrambling and whatnot, but one of the reasons he's had to do that is because there are some failures in the pass protection in front of him. He needs if a guy with the talents of Trey Ford is given a proper pocket to work with, I think that we could be seeing some really exciting stuff. So I think that's kind of important for the Elks moving forward. On the Lions side of things, this is a win they very much needed. I think if you're BC, you really just don't want to fall into the kind of slump that the Riders have fallen into, where they just seemingly are starting to lose games that they should win. Again, Edmonton has been playing better, but it's one of those things where at the end of the day, they still are the Edmonton Elks, in the sense of they're still at the bottom of the standings. That obviously may change going into next season, but we're not there yet. So if you're the BC Lions, you're expecting nothing but a win from this.
So, I mean, Mizell stepped up this game. He had 112 yards, 2 touchdowns. BC's defensive line came to life again. They had 7 sacks the whole game.
Well, and this was huge, that, like you said, that rushing offense for the BC Lions. His last game, I think Vernon Adams Jr. himself was leading the rushing offense. So being able to get that running game going is huge, as they've been struggling to get that going for these past few games.
I mean, I think there was like 1 point in the game. I can't remember where it was. It was like turnover, interception, turnover, missed field goal. It was just like one turnover after another. It's like, oh my God, what game are we watching?
Yeah, I think that was in the fourth quarter. I think I know, like, earlier in the fourth quarter. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm full of shit. But I remember when that happened, where seemingly it was whether it was throwing a pick or just fumbling the ball. It just seemed like it was kind of bouncing around, like that ball was bouncing around a pinball machine. So it's one of those things where overall, solid game. Dean Faithful, he'd go 2 for 4, his longest with 42. It's funny when you see that, a guy missed 2 kicks like that, it makes you wonder, like, because it's one of those things where when you say it, it sounds bad, but like how far were some of those attempts? Because I think one of them was like 50 yards. I could be wrong. One of his attempts. But I'd love to know what those are. I wish the score app would show me that, but it is what it is.
Okay, so.
Oh, are you able to see?
The last field goal with 6 seconds left. Yeah. So the last field goal with 6 seconds left was
the 50.
50 yards.
Yep.
There was.
And then the other one, he missed a 41. However, it was a dead ball, so he got a single out of that. So it was one of those things where, he missed 2.
Yeah, so he got
one of them was a
both.
very difficult kick. The other one was a difficult kick, but he was still able to get a point out of it. So overall, not too bad. For those who want to know a bit more about Dean Faithful, make sure to actually check out. We have a full player interview with Dean Faithful on the channel. It was an excellent time. A little over, I think it's over 40 minutes long. Good stuff. Make sure to check that out. But I mean, if we're looking at it here, it was the Elks played well. It was just one of those things where I think they were just outmatched.
Well, I mean, with BC Lions receiving core, can you blame them?
Well, exactly. It's one of those things where with the Edmonton Elks, with everything that they had, they were able to make the most out of it, and this gives them kind of the building blocks moving forward. And that's the thing. I think the Edmonton Elks have to be looking towards the future seasons, and obviously, live in the moment. If you're a player on the Elks, obviously you're looking to try to sneak into a spot if you can. But it's one of those things where realistically, if you're in management with the Edmonton Elks, you're thinking about, okay, how can we build on this moving into the future? But overall, Elks played well, still lost 37-29 victory for the BC Lions. And that will bring us
One thing that I will say before we move on to the next game, with the win, BC did clinch a playoff spot.
Yes, that is important. Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot about that. And also with the events that happened this week, the Bombers have clinched a home playoff game. Still not the West Final yet. That has not happened yet. Especially since the Bombers and the Lions have the same record now. But the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are guaranteed to have a home playoff game. But if we go into the next game, we have the Montreal Alouettes. They defeat the Calgary Stampeders by a score of 28-11. So for the preview of this week, I said it is time for the Calgary Stampeders to have some urgency. The Rough Riders, they had that loss to Edmonton. Who knows? I said maybe they'll lose to Ottawa. They probably won't, but maybe they lose. They lost. Calgary had every opportunity to get back into it. Obviously, Montreal has played well this season. They're no easy opponent in that regard, especially if you've fallen apart in the way that Calgary has. But Calgary does nothing in this game. This is another example of where they didn't win a single quarter. And not only did they not win a single quarter, they actively lost 3 of them. They only tied in the first quarter going 0-0 and then lost by 3 points, by 7 points, and by another 7 points. So it's one of those things where Calgary just seemingly just couldn't get anything going. They were picking up points here and picking up some points there, but it's one of those things where if you're the Calgary Stampeders, you got to get it going. And so overall, if we're looking at the stats here, Cody Fajardo would go 22 for 29. He'd throw 252 on the night there for the Alouettes. Jake Maier would throw 271, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Not so great in that regard. And he'd go 29 for 37. 37 attempts. It's one of those things where, Like, this is another example of, Calgary having to run that ball a little bit more. However, they did do a little bit better in that this game in that regard. Dietrich Mills would go 35 yards on 3 carries, and Kadeem Carey would go 70 yards on 10. So an improvement in that regard, but still, in my opinion, a little bit too much of a focus on Jake Maier's passing game, especially when you don't have, in my opinion, the receiving core to back up warranting throwing the ball every single play. So, I mean, what do you think, Rick?
So just to throw this out there, Fajardo after this game is now tied with Dustin Crum for 43 sacks in the season.
You're keeping track of this. What is last year's record? What was it?
77. But here's the interesting thing, though, and I'm gonna throw this interesting stat out to you. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Fajardo's making at least 3, if not 4 figures in Montreal. 5, maybe.
Do you mean 6 figures?
Yeah, like whatever he's making in Saskatchewan. Here's the thing. How embarrassing is it?
I think he's making almost $500,000.
Okay, so here's the thing. How embarrassing is it that the quarterback, the backup, Caleb Evans, regardless if it's passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, whatever it is, has just as many touchdowns as the guy making $500,000?
Well, you know what that reminds me of? It's the Dalton Schoen paradox, in the sense of Dalton Schoen is on a entry-level contract, but realistically, if he didn't have that ELC, he's making like $200,000 as a receiver. If he wasn't on his ELC, but he is, so I mean, not a problem for the Bombers. But it's just an example of, just because a guy's making a lot of money doesn't mean he's, doing that great. And so but that's just kind of the way the ball rolls in that regard.
No, but I mean, I don't even think I've seen Cody Fajardo have, unless I'm missing one game, I've never seen him throw more than like more than 2 touchdowns a game.
And that's the thing. Like, Cody Fajardo he's not a bad quarterback by any means. He's a fine quarterback. It's just there's just not a ton that makes him that special, which is, and I don't mean that in an insulting sense. There are some positives to that, in the sense of you don't have to worry about a guy getting a little bit too many ideas of his own, and he's going to stick to the playbook, going to stick to what his coach has instructed him to do, which is a very good thing. But it's one of those things where when push comes to shove, his adaptation is not on the same level as a guy like Caleras or even Trey Ford, in the sense of when Trey Ford's pocket is collapsing, he somehow finds his way out of it. Fajardo seemingly gets stuck in it about every single time. As how many times has Cody Fajardo been sacked? Drum roll, please. Rick, give me the answer.
43.
43 sacks. My goodness. Not exactly what you're hoping for. Although I will say the Alouettes do get at least 2 receivers that are able to go over 80 yards, with Philpott and Sneed going 87 and 83 yards respectively. Philpott on only 4 carries. So good for him. It's just one of those things where I want to get a little bit more out of him ideally. And if you're the Calgary Stampeders, it's, the Stampeders have committed hard to Jake Maier, which, like, I see why they did that, in the sense of he was, kind of seeming to be the future, but it's not great so far. So it's one of those things where I almost wonder if you reduce the workload on Maier, he becomes a better quarterback, in the sense of, if you don't have him throwing 37, if you have him throw 29, if you have him throw 27, and you're able to run that ball a bit more, I think maybe you might get some better results. It's one of those things where it's like, if you're playing baseball and you have a pitcher and he's your best pitcher, you can't have him pitch every single pitch of every game. Otherwise, you're going to tire him out to the point where he's not going to be that great of a pitcher anymore. So just kind of food for thought.
And funny thing is, former Saskatchewan Roughrider Darnell Sankey is back in the CFL after going south for a season, and he led Montreal's defense with 10 tackles.
Damn. Good
After
game for him.
I think I wasn't sure if it was the XFL or the USFL, but he went down there for a season. He's like, "Oh yeah,
And this was
I'll
who,
just
sorry?
come join Montreal, who has multiple
Who is this, sorry?
defensive players."
Who is this?
Darnell Sankey.
Darnell Sankey. I'm going to take a look. We're going to find out. Was he with...
I'm pretty sure it was the USFL.
Let's take a look. Oh, wait. I don't think so. I think it was with the XFL. As I see here.
Oh, yes, it was. Yeah, it was with the Arlington Renegades.
With the Arlington Renegades. But
so
he's
he
back
went
up
and won
in
a
Canada.
championship down there in May, and then they granted.
Yeah.
Yeah, he won a championship in May.
Hot
and
take:
granted his
the
release, and then he
$1
goes
million
back.
game of the 2001 XFL Championship is so much better than whatever the hell the new trophy is. New trophy's lame compared to Extreme. Bro, the $1 million game. That's such a silly idea. I fucking love it. But anyways, we're getting a little off topic. Overall, Alouettes win 28-11 over the Calgary Stampeders. And now we go on to our last game of the week. Dun, dun, dun. The Hamilton Tiger Cats come up short as the Toronto Argonauts win by a score of 29-14. However, Rick was taking a look over the stats, and he's saying that this loss that the Ticats had, despite them losing 3 of the 4 quarters of this football game, is not as bad as it may sound. Rick,
no,
let's hear it.
Because if you take away Toronto's 16 points in the first quarter, take away our 10 points in the fourth quarter, we only, I know it sounds bad, but the
That's
rest
a lot
of the
of
game
points
was only
to take away.
No, but it was only 13-4. Like, it's not, like, everyone made it sound like it was a lot worse than what it was. Yeah, offense didn't show up for 3 out of the 4 quarters.
Yep.
But, I mean, it was not as bad as everyone made it sound.
It's one of those things where, like, first off, Taylor Powell threw 42 attempts. What the fuck? Went 27 for 42. That is not great. Threw 334 is okay. 1 touchdown and 2 picks. Not ideal in that sense. Rushing, Butler was limited to 32 yards on 13 carries. Not ideal. If we look at Smith, though, with receiving yards, only 9 receptions, got himself 156 yards in that regard. So excellent there. Godwin the second would get the touchdown. Tim White would be
was nowhere to be found.
Was nowhere to be found. Was a little invisible. McAllister would play okay. He'd get 55 yards on 2 receptions, but
so
you got to get the run game going, man. Like 32 yards out of on 13 rushes by James Butler is not the numbers you're looking for out of James Butler.
So here's my theory on this play, and this drives me up the wall, is if you're standing here and you're a quarterback and you look to your right, and from where you are, like where you run back and you go to throw it, and your wide receiver is, 2 yards, 3 yards up the field, and you hitch pass it to the right, like how many, pardon my French, I'm not going to say the word.
How many?
Because
how many what?
I don't want to say the word because we don't want to get yelled at. But how many bloody freaking
you can say effing
hitch passes? How many effing hitch passes do we have to make in one game? Is going to drive me up the wall. Like, it's like every pass that you throw off to the right, hitch pass, hitch pass, hitch pass. Oh, and don't even get me started with the offensive line because, I mean...
Uh-oh.
Jordan Murray had 3 offside penalties alone. Then I think it was Woodmansey. I think it's 6. I would have to.
I'm getting like flashbacks to like Jeff Gray, like the left guard for the Bombers. Just because whenever the Bombers O-line gets a penalty, like 70%
and then
of the time it's him.
Woodmansey got one, so it's like I don't even like that's like what 4 out of the 9 penalties that we had on the offensive line.
Not great. Not sure what to tell you.
Oh, and not only that, but our opening drive, we get down to they had I forget what penalty it was. I think it was pass interference or something like that. And we had like first and goal from like the 5. Then it was second and goal from the 1.
Yep.
Like you can't get in for a touchdown from inside the 5. That's just
and that was something where I remember I can't remember if it was last year or the year prior, and it was the Bombers versus the Stamps. I was at the game, and it was 3rd and 1, and the Stamps kicked a field goal, and I said, "You know it's bad when you don't even trust your team to get one fucking yard." So, and that's something where I think if I'm a player and my coach makes that decision, I'm thinking like, you don't trust us to get a yard, which it's funny because there's two parts of that. Because there's the part that falls on the players where it's like, get your head out of your ass. He doesn't think you can get a yard. Maybe it's because you haven't shown that you can. You got to get that run game going. You got to be pushing that. You got to be able to get stuff done in short yardage. And then on the other side of that is the coaching aspect, where it's like, if you don't have the trust in your players to get that yard, then why are you coaching those players? In the sense of why are you not trying to get players that you do trust under your watch that you can then work with? So it's one of those things where there's two sides to that, and neither of them are good. So
trust me, we had one of those during the game. It was like 3rd and 1, but it was like a lot. It wasn't like 3rd and inches. It was like a third
and a full yard. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was the one where Mark Legio goes and kicks, like tries to kick like a 50-yard field goal. And I'm sure this was the one I was talking to you through Snapchat the other day, where it's like
where he came up short.
Yes, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yep. Yeah. No, that was the one, because I remember he kicked this field goal and I watched it. I'm like, all right, he's got the right angle, and I was like, oh, he didn't have enough Legio behind it.
And there was one play in the game where like I can't remember if Chad Kelly took it from the 40 or if Javon Leake returned it. And it's just like one pass downfield and it's a touchdown. It's like, are you kidding me? One pass and this guy's already thrown a touchdown. It's like, you can't
make that shit up.
Like, they didn't even have AJ Ouellette in the game.
Yeah, that's the thing that in my opinion kind of burns you, is that Andrew Harris and AJ Ouellette did not play. So it's one of those things where if you're, and Boris Beatty had himself a solid game for the Argos, but it's one of those things where if you're the Ticats, you want to get that done. You want to stop the running game, which the Ticats actually did a pretty good job stopping the running game, as McMahon would get 43 yards, but on 12 carries. So actually, funny enough, he would only narrowly do a little bit better than Butler. So good job stopping the running game for the Ticats, but not a good job in getting their own running game going themselves. But overall, I mean, it would be a 29-14 victory for the Toronto Argonauts to give them their 12th win of the season. They are 12-1, soon to be 12-2, if you ask me. But overall, that though is for a separate video. Is there anything else that you have to say, Rick, about this? No? So make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe if you have not already. Make sure you subscribe to the Nolan Hockey Podcast for all Winnipeg sports content, whether that's Winnipeg Jets, Winnipeg Blue Bombers, whatever it is. And make sure if you're looking for Hamilton Tiger Cats content, you subscribe to Ticats Talk Network. Links to all those pages down in the description below. And we will see you guys next time.